On the very first day we started dating, Juliana told me she had a first love she could never forget. I didn't think much of it. Who doesn't have a first love? A year later, Juliana took me to a cemetery. As I stared at the man's photo on the headstone, I forced out a smile that looked worse than crying. Was that really just a first love? No, he was the one that got away. In that moment, I knew it was time to let go. How could the living ever compete with the dead? Just as I was packing my bags, ready to disappear, her supposedly dead first love showed up at my door. Chapter 1. The first time I met Juliana was at my childhood friend Ignacio's wedding. I was the best man, and she was the bridesmaid. The moment I saw her, my eyes were drawn to the deep cleavage framed by her dress. It took all my willpower to look up at her face. Big mistake. She was gorgeous, and she was ice cold. Unfortunately for me, that was exactly my type. Her cool, elegant face paired with a body that should have been illegal was the ultimate contrast. That was the moment I finally understood what love at first sight felt like. Seeing me staring at her like a total simp, Ignacio waved a hand in front of my face. Skylar, stop staring. You've got no chance. She's famous for being impossible to win over. I just chuckled. I happen to enjoy impossible challenges. After asking around, I found out her name was Juliana. She was Dorotea's college roommate, and Dorotea was Ignacio's wife. Throughout all 4 years of college, countless guys had shown up outside her dorm with guitars, candlelit displays, and bouquets of roses. Every single one of them failed. That's how she earned the nickname, Ice Queen. Dorotea told me to drop the fantasy. You're not the Titanic, so why are you so determined to crash into an iceberg? I've always been stubborn. The more people tell me not to do something, the more determined I become. Seeing they couldn't talk me out of it, Ignacio and Dorotea gave up. When it was time for the bouquet toss, Dorotea noticed me eagerly getting into position. She sighed, turned her back, and deliberately tossed the bouquet in my direction. I caught it perfectly. The very next second, I walked up to Juliana, held the bouquet out to her, and smiled. Beautiful. Give me a chance. The guests instantly erupted into cheers, and the atmosphere exploded. Juliana looked at me without the slightest expression. Are you sure you want to pursue me? I nodded seriously. She accepted the bouquet and let out a soft sigh. You still have time to change your mind. To be honest, there's someone I could never forget. That didn't bother me at all. Who doesn't have a first love? But how many people actually end up with their first love? Seeing that I wasn't backing down, Juliana nodded. Fine. I'll give you the chance to pursue me. Just don't regret it. Even Ignacio and Dorotea were stunned on stage. I shot them a smug grin. Not wanting to interrupt the wedding any longer, Juliana and I said goodbye to the newlyweds and left. We walked to the riverside. Juliana stood with her hands behind her back, quietly gazing into the distance. I stood behind her, quietly admiring her incredible figure. After a long silence, she turned around and looked at me seriously. Skylar, why are you pursuing me? I didn't pretend to be some noble gentleman. I told her exactly what I was thinking. Because you're beautiful, and you've got an amazing body. A faint smile curled at the corner of her lips. That's all. I stepped forward until we were standing side by side. Isn't that enough? I think choosing a girlfriend is a lot like buying clothes. If the way it looks doesn't catch your eye, you'll never even want to try it on. As for whether it actually suits you, you only find out after wearing it for a while. Juliana thought about it for a moment before nodding. That makes sense. I continued. But the moment I saw you, I had this overwhelming feeling. You're the one I'm meant to be with. She looked at me in surprise and murmured softly. Meant to be. Of course, I wasn't dumb enough to keep talking about that. If the conversation somehow drifted to her first love, this relationship would have been over before it even had the chance to begin. Chapter 2. That evening, I took Juliana to a street food market. I'd put quite a bit of thought into choosing it for our first date. As expected, watching the bustling crowd around us, her eyes were filled with curiosity. I didn't hold back. Once the skewers arrived, I was eating so fast it felt like the metal sticks were about to spark. Skylar, why did you bring me here? Instead of answering, I asked. You're not some rich heiress, are you? Juliana shook her head. My dad's a high school teacher, and my mom's a doctor. Perfect. Our families weren't that different. I brought you here because you're missing something. She looked at me curiously. What am I missing? I wasn't sure if she'd appreciate me being too blunt, but looking at how distant and untouchable she seemed, like someone completely removed from everyday life, I figured strong medicine worked best for stubborn problems. You're missing a little humanity. I mean, you don't really have that down-to-earth warmth. Juliana pressed her lips together and fell into deep thought. I didn't interrupt her. I let her take her time to process it. She didn't say another word for the rest of the meal. When it was time to leave, she waved goodbye. Skylar, I had a great time today. Thank you. I watched her get into her car and told her to text me when she got home safely before heading back myself. The moment I got home, my phone buzzed. Her message contained just one word: home. I smiled helplessly and replied, "Good." Looks like winning her over was going to be a long, uphill battle. I'd just finished my shower when someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, Ignacio and Dorotea were standing outside. "Aren't you two supposed to be spending your wedding night together? What are you doing here? Or am I somehow part of your roleplay?" Dorotea rolled her eyes. Then she said earnestly, "Skylar, you should stop chasing Juliana. There's something you should know. She has a first love she can't let go of." I nodded. "She already told me today." Dorotea's eyes widened. "And you're still going after her?" I curled my lip dismissively. "You're thinking too small." Ignacio shoved me lightly. "Quit acting mysterious. Just say it." I cleared my throat. "Juliana isn't dating because she can't move on from her first love." Dorotea nodded. "So, is she still in contact with him?" Dorotea thought for a moment. "No. At least during the 4 years we shared a dorm room. I never saw her contact him, but she'd often stare off into the distance. The look in her eyes. It was like she was missing someone." Ignacio immediately cut in. "See, that's exactly why you shouldn't chase her. You're really going after a woman whose heart already belongs to someone else." I waved my hand. "No, you're wrong. I actually like girls who love that deeply. She's just stuck on one chapter of her life. The day she finally turns that page and reaches mine, she'll love me with that same devotion. Doesn't that make sense?" Ignacio thought about it for a moment. "I guess it does. Not that I can relate. I don't even remember what my first love looked like anymore." The next second, Dorotea grabbed him by the ear. "I thought you said I was your first love. Come on, we're going home. And you're explaining yourself." Ignoring the bickering newlyweds, I shut the door behind them. Then I lay down on my bed and stared at the ceiling. It all sounded easy enough, but if turning that page were really so simple, Juliana wouldn't still be trapped there today. Chapter 3. From that day on, I made winning Juliana's heart my mission. I couldn't help it. That feeling of being meant for each other was completely addictive. It's hard to put into words. Maybe it happens in a school hallway. Maybe in an empty study room. For just a brief moment, it feels like the whole world disappears, leaving only you and her. You can almost feel your heartbeats falling into the same rhythm. It's an incredible feeling. Juliana's office wasn't far from mine, so every morning, I'd drive her to work. Whenever I had free time, I'd send her funny stories from my day or interesting memes and pictures. She replied to every message. Her responses weren't long, but they were always genuine. After work, we'd go on dates. Sometimes we'd hang out with friends. Other times, we'd simply wander around the city together. Juliana never seemed resistant, but she never seemed especially enthusiastic either. Most of our conversations revolved around our daily lives. A few times, when the topic drifted toward past relationships, I'd immediately change the subject. I genuinely didn't care about her first love. He belonged to the past. I was the present. There was no point competing with someone who was already history. More than half a year passed. Juliana and I grew closer, but only a little. The most intimate thing we'd done was hold hands while taking a walk. Nothing beyond that. Then one night, I suddenly got a call from Juliana. For the first time ever, I heard panic in her voice. "Skylar, can you come to my house? My dad collapsed." I jumped out of bed without a second thought and rushed over. By the time I arrived, Juliana's mother was already performing first aid on her husband. After confirming with her that he could be moved safely, I immediately lifted Juliana's father onto my back. The roads were almost empty that late at night. I floored the accelerator. Sitting in the back seat, Juliana's mother pulled out her phone with trembling hands and made several calls. By the time we reached the hospital, a stretcher was already waiting outside the entrance. The emergency doctors rushed Juliana's father straight into the operating room. Juliana stayed outside with her mother. From time to time, doctors came over to comfort her. Only then did I learn that Juliana's mother was a doctor at this very hospital. Meanwhile, I ran all over the building, handling the paperwork and paying the medical bills. The operating room lights didn't go out until dawn. Thankfully, Juliana's father pulled through. The doctor who performed the emergency treatment explained that he had suffered a cardiac-related heart attack. If we hadn't gotten him there so quickly, things could have ended very differently. Had they waited for an ambulance to arrive before transporting him, it might have been too late. For the first time, there was warmth in the way Juliana looked at me. After running around the entire night, I felt like I was about to collapse. But seeing the gratitude in her eyes made every bit of it worthwhile. After her father was transferred to a regular hospital room, I volunteered to take care of him. As the only man there, it was simply more convenient. Juliana's father turned out to be an easygoing man. During those few days, we talked about all sorts of things. The way he looked at me gradually became kinder and kinder. Instead of giving me a hard time for stealing away his precious daughter, he treated me with genuine warmth. After 3 days in the hospital and another round of examinations, the doctor approved his discharge. I drove the family home. After sitting with them for a while, I got up to leave. Juliana walked me downstairs. Her face flushed red as she suddenly wrapped her arms around me. Skylar, thank you. I gently stroked her hair. You don't have to thank me. Not between us. Who knows? Maybe before long, your dad will be my dad too. Her face turned even redder. Chapter 4. When I got home, I collapsed onto my bed. The past few days had completely worn me out. Somewhere between sleeping and waking, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Juliana was standing there with several bags in her hands. I froze. I had no idea what was going on. With her head lowered, she spoke so softly it was almost a whisper. I told my parents I was coming to stay with you. They said yes. Wait, was she moving in with me? A grin spread across my face. Talk about a dream come true. I took her luggage and led her inside. Although Juliana knew where I lived, she'd never actually been to my apartment. As soon as she walked in, she curiously looked around at everything. I asked if she'd eaten. She nodded. I already have. Then let's get some sleep. I took her hand and led her toward the bedroom. The first thing that had ever attracted me to her was her stunning figure. Now that she was willingly here with me, I'd be lying if I said my heart wasn't racing. I wasn't a saint. Juliana struggled for a moment. After slipping out of my embrace, she quickly got off the bed. Her cheeks flushed bright red as she stammered. Skylar, I'm going to take a shower. Then she hurried into the bathroom. Watching her graceful figure disappear behind the door, I could barely keep my heart under control. Was happiness really knocking on my door? Everything was happening so suddenly. After her shower, Juliana lay down with her back facing me. Without saying anything, I wrapped my arms around her. Her body tensed for a long while before gradually relaxing. That night, I held the woman I loved in my arms for the first time. The next day, I took her home to meet my parents. They adored Juliana. She was kind, polite, and carried herself with quiet grace. With both families' blessing, we officially moved in together. Living together brought us much closer. She no longer pulled away whenever I hugged or held her. But every time I tried to take things any further, she'd gently but firmly stop me. Seeing the frustration written all over my face, Juliana would apologize guiltily. I'm sorry, Skylar. Please give me a little more time. I'm not ready yet. All I could do was nod and tell her I understood. I really did understand. But understanding didn't make waiting any easier. I'd thought my presence would eventually help her move on from her first love. Instead, that old memory refused to let go. On the first anniversary of our relationship, Juliana and I invited Ignacio and Dorotea out for dinner. After all, they were the reason we'd met. Watching the two of us together, we looked no different from any other couple deeply in love. Dorotea was so touched she nearly cried. Julie, back in college, everyone in our dorm thought no man would ever be worthy of you. And somehow, this brat actually won your heart. Juliana smiled before pulling Dorotea aside to whisper about something. Ignacio nudged me with his elbow. So, did you finally win her over? I could only smile bitterly and shake my head. His eyes lit up immediately. What happened? Come on, tell me. I could use a good laugh. What was I supposed to say? That she still hadn't turned the page on the person in her heart? There was no way I was admitting that. That night, after we got home, Juliana seemed unusually nervous. She kept stealing glances at me, her cheeks turning pink every time our eyes met. After her shower, she stopped me before I went to bed. Skylar, do you still want us to be closer? I looked at her in confusion, blushing from ear to ear. She whispered. Dorotea told me, if I've truly made up my mind, I shouldn't keep making you wait. I immediately understood. So Dorotea had been giving her advice. I looked into Juliana's eyes. Have you really made up your mind? She bit her lower lip and stayed silent. After a long moment, I sighed. Let's just get some sleep. After the lights were turned off, Juliana shyly leaned over and kissed me. Her movements were awkward and hesitant as she tried to respond to my affection. In the end, neither of us held back any longer. When everything had settled down, I switched on the bedside lamp. Looking at the faint stain on the sheets, I froze. Julie, the first love you said you could never forget. Did that happen when you were 10? She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. No, I was 18. I didn't give her a chance to say another word. I went at it again. Chapter 5. The next morning, Juliana curled up in my arms and asked softly, Skylar, can you come with me to see him one last time? I want to say goodbye to the past. My good mood vanished in an instant. Wasn't an ex supposed to stay in the past like they were dead? Why was she still unable to let him go? What was there to say goodbye to? It sounded more like an excuse to see him again. Still, remembering that last night had been her first time, I reluctantly agreed. I didn't know where they were meeting. So Juliana drove. But the farther we went, the more remote the road became. I started to panic. Julie, where are we going? There was an unmistakable sadness in her eyes. We're almost there. When we arrived, I looked at the photo of the young man on the gravestone and forced a smile that looked worse than crying. Juliana, you called him your first love? This wasn't just a first love, he was the love you never got over. Damn it, I was such an idiot. Why didn't I ask whether her first love was dead or alive? Watching tears stream down Juliana's face, I knew I had already lost. No living person can compete with the dead. I'd better leave. She could keep the house if she wanted. I couldn't live with a wife whose heart still belonged to a grave. As soon as we got home, I started packing my things. Juliana was still drowning in grief and didn't notice I was about to leave. Just as I was packing in full swing, someone knocked on the door. I walked over and opened it. The man standing outside looked strangely familiar. Wait, why did he look exactly like the boy in the photo on the gravestone? His gaze went past me and landed directly on Juliana. Julie, I'm back. Chapter 6. Juliana's expression was a whirlwind of emotions. Disbelief, panic, anger, everything except fear. I patted my chest in relief. Good, at least he was a person, not a ghost. The man shifted sideways, trying to squeeze into the house. I reached out and blocked him. Hey, no matter what, I'm still the owner of this house. You can't just barge in without even saying hello. His eyes were bloodshot as he roared at me. Get the hell out of my way. Damn, he's got quite the temper. Juliana stood up, walked over, and wrapped an arm around mine. Alonso, you're not dead. As she spoke, I could feel her body trembling uncontrollably. I couldn't tell if it was from excitement or pure rage. Alonso looked at her pleadingly. I'm not dead. The moment I saw your posts online, I flew back from overseas. Then he shot me a vicious glare. Out of nowhere. I had no idea why he hated me so much. Juliana laughed. A bitter, heartbreaking laugh. So, when your mother told me you died in a car accident while buying my birthday cake, that was a lie too. Alonso lowered his head without saying a word. Alonso, when you wanted to study abroad, I never tried to stop you, but why did you have to trick me in such a despicable way? Watching Juliana tremble with anger, everything suddenly started to make sense. Honey, don't get worked up just yet. I think I've figured out what happened between you two. Before Juliana could respond, Alonso lunged at me like a madman. Who gave you permission to call Julie honey? I lifted my leg and kicked him straight to the floor. I've been putting up with your crap for a while now. You break into my house and then try to throw punches. You deserve it even if I beat the hell out of you. Clutching his stomach, Alonso writhed on the floor in pain. Julie, he's violent. You can't be with someone like him. Too bad. His pathetic act earned him zero sympathy from Juliana. She looked at him expressionlessly for a second before turning away, ignoring the men rolling around on the floor. I led Juliana back to the couch. Honey, listen to my theory. If I get anything wrong, just correct me. Juliana nodded obediently. You were classmates. He was your first love. You dated for years. Juliana held up 3 fingers. We met in high school. We were together for 3 years. I nodded and continued. After the college entrance exams, he wanted to go abroad, but you didn't. Juliana pressed her lips together and nodded. I glanced at Alonso, who was still lying on the floor, raising an eyebrow. I said, now I get it. He staged this whole thing himself just to keep you emotionally tied to him. He didn't want to lose you because he was leaving, but he also didn't want to give up his chance to study abroad because of you. So on his way to buy your birthday gift, he conveniently died in a car accident. He faked his death, slipped away, and left the country. Then, once he was overseas, he had his mother tell you what had happened. So you'd spend years drowning in guilt, and never get over him. That way, no matter how many years later he came back, he'd still have a chance to win you back, because you'd never be able to forget him. Juliana's expression changed. She slowly turned and fixed her eyes on Alonso without blinking. A flash of panic crossed Alonso's face. He shouted at me. Stop making things up. I really was hit by a car back then. I almost didn't make it. I let out a scoff. Give me a break, kid. Your script is way too cheesy. Isn't this just one of those worn-out fake death plots from those old Hong Kong and Taiwanese dramas? Only someone as trusting as Julie would have fallen for it. You said you were in a car accident. Where's the hospital record? Where's your medical file? This time, Alonso had nothing to say. Chapter 7. I ignored him and turned to Juliana. Now there's just one last question. Why did he rush back from overseas the moment he saw your Instagram? What exactly did you post? Blushing, Juliana shyly handed me her phone. Why, you'll have to see for yourself. I took the phone and asked. Password. She answered softly. Your birthday. That instantly put me in a good mood. After unlocking it, I opened Instagram. I hadn't used the app in well over a decade. I didn't expect Juliana was still active on it. She only had one friend, a profile named Alone. I didn't have to guess who it was. Alonso. Juliana had been posting there all along. For the first few years, every post was filled with guilt and longing for Alonso. She kept blaming herself. wondering why she'd insisted on making him buy that birthday cake. I couldn't help laughing. Juliana looked at me in confusion. Skylar, what are you laughing at? I gently patted her on the head. Silly girl, you weren't being unreasonable at all. Forget a birthday cake. Even if you'd asked Alonso to buy an orange, he still would've ended up getting hit by that car. Juliana pouted. Her big, watery eyes were full of grievance. I kept scrolling. About a year ago, her posts started to change. Today I was my best friend's bridesmaid. The best man was so weird. No one's ever looked at me like that before. Most people only sneak a glance or two, but he shamelessly checked me out from head to toe. What a jerk. But the moment he handed me the bouquet, it felt like everyone else disappeared. There were only the two of us at the wedding. The way our hearts seemed to beat in sync, it was indescribable. So when he said he wanted to date me, I said yes without even thinking. It felt like fate had brought him to me. I looked up at Juliana. Her cheeks were bright red. So, I wasn't the only one who'd felt that instant connection. Maybe that was what people meant by fate. The posts that followed were little snapshots of our everyday life together. Mentions of Alonso became fewer and fewer. When her father collapsed, she wrote about that too. Dad suddenly collapsed today. Mom and I completely panicked. While Mom was giving him first aid, she told me to call for help. Strangely, I didn't call an ambulance first. The first person I called was Skylar. It turned out that was the right decision. The moment he arrived and carried Dad on his back, I felt completely safe. Watching him run around the hospital taking care of everything, I felt so at peace. Maybe he's the person I can truly rely on. Dad came home from the hospital today. For the first time in my life, I had a bold idea. I told my parents I wanted to move in with Skylar. I never expected them to say yes, but when I stood outside Skylar's door with my suitcase, I was terrified. What if he thought less of me because of it? I looked at Juliana with a teasing smile. She was so embarrassed that she buried her face against her chest. I read through every post she'd made after we started living together. It was obvious. Little by little, her heart had completely drifted toward me. Then I reached yesterday's post. It was the last one she'd written. Today we treated my best friend and her husband to dinner. During the meal, my best friend pulled me aside and asked if Skylar and I had done it yet. I didn't know how to answer. Over this past year together, Skylar has proven again and again that he's someone I can trust with my whole life. I want to give myself to him, but I've never experienced anything like that before. I'm scared. My best friend told me that sometimes a girl just has to make the first move. She said no man can resist it when the girl takes the initiative. I've decided to try tonight. Juliana, you can do this. Chapter 8. Looking at Alonso lying on the floor with a face as pale as death, I asked. So the real reason you came back was because you saw Juliana was finally ready to give herself completely to me, wasn't it? You panicked. You were afraid you'd never get another chance to win her back. Alonso didn't answer. He didn't have to. That had to be the reason. Otherwise, why would he leave his PhD program overseas and rush back? I let out a cold laugh. Alonso, what exactly have all those years of studying taught you? You're the kind of selfish guy who wants to have it both ways. If someone like you ever ends up in a position of power, a lot of people are going to suffer. My advice: learn how to be a decent human being before you bury yourself in more books. Otherwise, you'll just become a walking disaster. Alonso kept pretending not to hear me. Not a word. Juliana looked at him without the slightest ripple in her eyes, as if she were looking at a complete stranger. I let out a long breath. At last, that chapter of her life was finally over. To be honest, I was actually glad Alonso was alive. At least I didn't have to spend the rest of my life wondering. Otherwise, if one day I'd stumbled across Juliana's Instagram, I'd probably regret it forever. Just as I was about to reread her posts, Juliana gently tugged at my hand. Honey, maybe we should call the police. If he keeps lying in our house and the neighbors see him, it won't look good. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Honey, what did you just call me? Blushing, she softly repeated it. Husband. It was the first time she'd ever called me that. Normally, she never minded when I called her honey, but she'd never once called me husband. At that moment, Alonso suddenly let out a beast-like roar. Then he scrambled to his feet and fled our house in utter disgrace. Watching him run away, I smacked my lips. Honey, do you think it's a little cruel that we're rubbing our happiness in front of your first love? Juliana lightly smacked me on the arm. That night, I very thoroughly made up for our missed lessons. I couldn't help it. Her cool little face paired with that unfairly perfect figure. She was absolutely addictive. Honey, even if Alonso had really died, he still wouldn't compare to me, right? See, that's what I thought. How could a dead man ever beat a living one? Look how happy you are now. Husband, you're such a pervert. After finally breaking down that last emotional wall between us, our relationship took off. Even if we didn't say a word, just exchanging a glance across the dinner table was enough to see the happiness in each other's eyes. A month later, my parents and I brought gifts to Juliana's home to formally meet her family. Her parents welcomed us warmly. Ever since I'd saved her father's life, they couldn't stop smiling whenever they saw me. At lunch, Juliana's father prepared a huge feast and even brought out a bottle of liquor he'd been saving for years. Just as he was about to pour himself a drink, I stopped him. My dad frowned at me, thinking I'd crossed the line. Juliana's mother smiled and explained, "Please don't misunderstand Skylar. My husband has heart disease. He can't drink." The moment my dad heard that, he immediately turned his wine glass upside down on the table. "Then none of us should drink. If no one else drinks, he won't be tempted either." The meal couldn't have gone better. Afterward, both families gathered in the living room to discuss the bride price. Juliana looked nervous, afraid such practical matters might create tension between our families. I gently squeezed her hand, telling her not to worry. My mother smiled, took out a bank card, and handed it to Juliana's mother. Traditionally, the bride price around here is $188,000, but I adore Julie, so I added another $100,000. "There's $288,000 on this card. Please accept it." Juliana's mother didn't refuse. Instead, she immediately handed the card to Juliana. "This money belongs to you too. Once you and Skylar start your own family, live a happy life together. That's all we could ever ask for." Then she glanced at Juliana's father. Grinning, he took out another bank card and handed it to me. "This is a little gift from your aunt and me. Think of it as our support for your future together. It's not much, just $100,000. I didn't want to accept it, but Juliana accepted it on my behalf. For one of the rare times, a bright smile appeared on her face. "Thank you, Mom and Dad." Chapter 9. After settling the bride price, the next thing to decide was the wedding date. Juliana was scheduled to take the Certified Public Accountant exam in 6 months. It meant a great deal to her. She had been preparing for it for a long time. I didn't want the wedding to interfere with her studies, so we agreed to hold the wedding 6 months later. Both sets of parents nodded in approval. When a child is working hard toward their future, parents should support them no matter what. Once everything was settled, my parents and I left her house. As Juliana walked us to the door, she glanced around to make sure no one was nearby before leaning close to whisper in my ear, "Husband, take your parents home first. I'll be waiting for you." Seeing her flushed little face made my heart race. It wasn't often that someone as shy and reserved as her took the initiative. After the wedding date was set, we invited our friends out for dinner. All of Juliana's college roommates came. They were still shocked that she was getting married. After all, she'd done such a perfect job maintaining her cool, untouchable image back in college. The most excited people, however, were Ignacio and Dorotea. Dorotea insisted that she deserved a seat at the main table during the wedding. "If I hadn't dragged Juliana into being my bridesmaid, you two never would have met." Ignacio immediately backed her up. "My wife is absolutely right. No matter how you look at it, we're your matchmakers." I curled my lip and looked at them with obvious skepticism. The moment our friends saw my expression, they knew there was a story behind it. After a few drinks, Ignacio was getting tipsy. "Skylar, why are you looking at me like that? Aren't my wife and I the reason you two got together?" I let out a cold laugh. "Really? Who was the one who kept telling me Juliana was impossible to win over? Who said I didn't stand a chance?" Ignacio awkwardly glanced at Juliana. Then I turned to Dorotea. "And who told me to give up that unrealistic fantasy? You even said I wasn't the Titanic. So why insist on crashing into an iceberg?" Dorotea pressed her lips together. Seeing how awkward things had become, Juliana quickly stepped in. "Husband, you can't say that. If Dorotea hadn't intentionally thrown the bouquet to you, we wouldn't be where we are today." That single word, "husband," left all of Juliana's roommates completely stunned. Dorotea immediately grabbed the roommate beside her in excitement. "This is unbelievable. Our ice queen actually called someone husband." The other girls immediately started cheering, telling Juliana to say it again. Her face turned completely crimson. The meal continued with laughter and teasing. Everyone had a wonderful time. After dinner, Juliana and I walked home hand in hand. She looked at me cautiously. "Husband, when you were pursuing me, did you already imagine we'd end up like this?" I nodded without hesitation. "Honey, do you remember what you wrote on Instagram about feeling like we were meant to be?" Juliana nodded softly. I turned to her and met her eyes. I felt the same thing. "When Ignacio and Dorotea kept trying to talk me out of chasing you, I told them I was going to pursue you no matter what, because that feeling was impossible to ignore. It was like the entire world disappeared, and there were only the two of us, as if we were destined to be together." Juliana looked up at the bright moon hanging in the night sky. "You're right. Looking back now, that's exactly how it felt. We were always meant to be together, hand in hand." We walked on without saying another word. That feeling returned once more. It was as though the entire world had faded away, leaving only the two of us. The crowded streets, the endless traffic, the noise of the city, all of it disappeared. All I could feel was our hearts beating in perfect sync. Chapter 10. Just as we were wrapped up in that indescribable feeling, a dark figure suddenly jumped out in front of us. The moment was instantly ruined. I was so annoyed I could have blown a gasket. Who the hell didn't have the sense to watch where they were going? Then I looked closer. It was Alonso. That only made me even more irritated. Juliana was upset too. Without even glancing at him, she held my hand and tried to walk around him, but with a loud thud, Alonso dropped to his knees in front of her. Julie, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I never should have lied to you. Can you forgive me just this once? I finally understand now. Nothing matters more than you. I really can't live without you. I turned to look at Juliana. Her eyes were so clear they were almost frightening. There was no love left in them, not even hatred. Alonso, please don't show up in front of me again. To me, you're just a stranger I happen to recognize. Her voice was completely devoid of warmth. Alonso was visibly shaken by her indifference. Julie, please don't do this. I know I was wrong. Even if you hate me, that's okay. Juliana's expression remained as cold as ice. Why would I hate you? If you hadn't shown up today, I probably would have forgotten someone like you even existed. That felt incredibly satisfying. Nothing cuts deeper than being ignored. Hatred at least means the other person still cares. But being looked through as if you were nothing more than air. No one could take that without breaking. Chapter 11. Alonso's return turned out to be nothing more than a brief interruption. The kind of thing people forget almost as soon as it's over. It was hard to leave a lasting impression. The man who had once been Juliana's unforgettable first love had become someone she wouldn't even remember unless she deliberately thought about him. I guess a first love is easiest to romanticize when it stays in the past. A living one rarely remains unforgettable forever. I thought Alonso would have taken the hint and backed off. Turns out, he had no shame at all. After being ignored like that, most people would have had enough dignity to walk away. Not him. The very next evening, when I went to pick Juliana up from work, I spotted him from a distance. He was trailing behind her like a lost puppy, rambling non-stop. Juliana didn't even spare him a glance. She simply ignored him. One of the security guards at the entrance noticed what was happening and walked over to ask her about it. Juliana gently shook her head and pointed at Alonso. From the way her lips moved, I could tell exactly what she'd said. I don't know him. The guard's eyes widened instantly, pointing at Alonso. He barked. Sir, leave immediately. If you continue harassing our employee, I'll be forced to remove you. I quickened my pace and walked over to Juliana. The moment she saw me, her face lit up with a smile. Husband, you're here. I nodded and pointed at Alonso, who was now struggling with the security guard. What's going on here? Afraid I might misunderstand. Juliana hurried to explain. Honey, I have no idea why he showed up here, but I didn't say a single word to him. Seeing the panic on her face, I immediately reassured her. Relax. You really think I wouldn't trust my own wife? What I mean is, he can't keep harassing you like this every day. The security guard heard that, pulled out his baton, and smacked Alonso across the head several times. So you're a repeat offender. Huh. Get lost. If I catch you anywhere near this company again, I'm calling the police. Holding his head, Alonso fled in embarrassment. The guard jogged back over to Juliana. Director, I promise, I won't let that man get anywhere near the company again. And, Director, could you do me a favor and not bring this up at tomorrow morning's meeting? Juliana nodded gently. To everyone at work, she seemed difficult to approach. She always wore the same expressionless face, cold to everyone around her. But in reality, she was surprisingly easygoing, as long as you didn't cross her boundaries. She almost never lost her temper. After getting her promise, the security guard was overjoyed. From then on, he patrolled the grounds with his baton at his side, constantly watching for Alonso. Alonso did come back a few more times, but after getting chased off and beaten a few times, he finally learned his lesson. 6 months flew by. As Juliana walked out of the CPA exam, she smiled brightly at me. Husband, I'm definitely going to pass. Hearing her say that, I knew she had done well. After taking her home, she reminded me again and again to arrive early the next morning to pick her up for the wedding. She couldn't wait to become my wife. As it happened, the next day was also her birthday. A birthday and a wedding. 2 celebrations wrapped into one. Early the next morning, I drove to Juliana's house. After all the traditional wedding games and plenty of laughter with my groomsmen, I carried Juliana in my arms toward the car. Just then, a man's voice rang out from the distance. Julie, don't marry him. Look what I brought. I looked up. Alonso was sprinting toward us, holding a birthday cake. Julie, the birthday cake I never got to give you 10 years ago. I'm finally bringing it to you now. Perhaps he really was in a hurry. He climbed right over the median barrier without a second thought. I quickly covered Juliana's eyes with my hand. It was horrifying. A speeding dump truck ran him over without slowing down. There was Alonso all over the road. Well, I guess the role he once acted out had finally become reality.